There's an inexplicable reason why some individuals appear utterly unperturbed, as if impervious to life's trials. Imagine a world engulfed in chaos, where meticulously constructed plans crumble to dust, relationships painfully sever, betrayals pierce like sharp daggers, and one problem relentlessly replaces another. These people may face insults, misunderstandings, and even attempts to break their will, yet they remain unyielding. They maintain clarity of mind and fortitude of spirit, as if an impregnable fortress is erected within them, like a majestic mountain, steadfastly towering amidst a raging storm. What do they know that eludes the understanding of most? What secret power do they harness, allowing them to maintain composure while those around them lose control? Often people spend their lives in constant reaction rather than conscious living. Someone rudely cuts them off on the road, and an instantaneous surge of anger blinds their reason. A colleague makes a snide remark and their mood is hopelessly ruined for the entire day. A random passerby casts a fleeting glance, and sudden self-doubt creeps into their soul, causing them to agonizingly question, "Is everything all right with me?" It's as if invisible threads connect their emotions to the external world, tugging them in different directions at the whim of circumstances. But what if there was a way to sever these shackles? What if one could attain freedom from this dependence? Imagine that no person, no situation, no failure, no judgment, nothing external had the power to disrupt your inner peace. What if the key to unwavering tranquility resided within you, awaiting its moment? As the insightful Jung asserted, many people find themselves captive to their own automatic reactions, mistakenly believing that life dictates its terms to them and turns them into helpless victims. However, in essence, they act as mirrors, reflecting deeply ingrained emotional traumas, self-doubts, and internal discord that they have never taken the time to contemplate and heal. There's a bitter truth. External factors hold no power over a person if there's no hook in their inner world to latch onto. For instance, if an insult hits a nerve, it signals a subconscious fear that there might be a grain of truth in those words. If being ignored by others evokes painful feelings, it indicates an unmet need for external validation. This is why two people, finding themselves in identical circumstances, can react completely differently. One may break under the weight of problems, while the other becomes even stronger and more resilient. The key factor is not the situation itself, but what was already brewing inside each of them. This process can be characterized as shadow work, a transformative, albeit sometimes painful journey of turning the unconscious into the conscious, illuminating the darkest and most hidden corners of the psyche. It's a bold step of acknowledging that every irritation, every disappointment, every emotional trigger that catches you off guard is not something to be suppressed or avoided. On the contrary, it's an important message, a signal, an impulse emanating from the depths of your being, urging you to pay attention to your inner world rather than seeking blame externally. However, the vast majority of people prefer to avoid these signals throughout their lives. They shy away from unpleasant sensations, muffling them with entertainment and distractions, suppressing them with excessive busyness, or shifting responsibility onto others. He caused me to feel this way. She disrupted my inner peace. The world is full of injustice. They perceive their own triggers as enemies, unaware of their true nature, invitations to personal growth. But those who are willing to cease this flight and turn to face pain and discomfort begin to realize a revolutionary truth. The external world is merely a mirror, accurately reflecting the chaos or clarity that exists in their own minds and hearts. And once this realization solidifies, it fundamentally changes everything. The moment a person ceases striving to control external circumstances and begins to manage their inner world, they attain something truly valuable: sovereignty over their experience. However, a complexity arises here. Many people do not aspire to such responsibility. It's easier for them to cling to the comforting illusion that the ex-partner, the boss, the upbringing, the economic situation, or fate itself is to blame. It's easier to feel like a victim of circumstances than to admit that they themselves may be daily, even momentarily, relinquishing their power. However, for those rare souls who dare to look within themselves, For those who leave behind automatic reactions and begin conscious observation, an entirely new universe of freedom unfolds. This isn't the kind of freedom that comes from controlling others or manipulating circumstances, but a serene, unshakable freedom born from the absence of the very need for control. There's no longer a need to adapt to negatively inclined people or meticulously manage every aspect of your life. There's no requirement for everyone around you to approve of your every action or for events to unfold exactly as planned. You simply become invulnerable, not in the sense of detachment and insensitivity, but in a deeply rooted, absolutely vibrant sense. Untouchable, not because external factors have no influence, but because they no longer have power over your inner world. Herein lies a paradox. Most of humanity spends their lives trying to control what they were never meant to control: the behavior of others, the outcomes of events, the opinions of others, and even the passage of time. In doing so, they overlook the one thing over which they have always had true and unwavering power, their own perception, the very lens through which they interpret everything that happens. And when this realization dawns, when you assert your full right to own this lens, your entire reality begins to transform in ways that previously seemed unimaginable. Carl Jung, the insightful explorer of the human soul, penetrated a profound truth that many people try to avoid throughout their lives, preferring to deny or simply ignore it. The external world, with its multitude of people, events, and circumstances that often become the object of our obsession, is inherently neutral. It has no inherent meaning, no innate cruelty or kindness, no predestination to good or bad. It simply exists, unfolding before us like a river, indifferent to our expectations and unperturbed by our feelings. However, each of us perceives this neutral world through a prism, through a filter woven from the personal story we unconsciously inherited from our past. It is this story, our individual perception, that colors everything we see and feel. Imagine a situation. Two people face an absolutely identical event: a sudden breakup, a devastating financial loss, or a painful rejection. One of them is broken, consumed by feelings of shame and hopelessness, convinced of the injustice of life and their own doom. The other, rising with tear-filled eyes, says, "This is hard, but maybe this is exactly what I needed." While one sees the end of everything in what happened, the other sees the beginning of a new stage. The essence of the difference lies not in the event itself, but in the meaning that each of them attaches to it. Carl Jung, a perceptive researcher of the human psyche, once remarked, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These words contain a deep truth. Until you become aware of your deep-seated beliefs, fears, and prejudices hidden in the subconscious, you will remain a puppet in their hands. These unconscious scripts, which determine your self-esteem, expectations of others, and ideas about deservedness, will invisibly influence your actions and decisions. You will blindly react to what is happening, mistakenly believing that life is unfair to you or that luck has turned away from you, not realizing that you are actually the author of your own script. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that the more you strive to control the world around you, predetermine outcomes, manipulate the opinions of others, and tailor life to your expectations, the deeper you plunge into the abyss of suffering. As soon as you begin to need confirmation of your worth from others, you voluntarily give them the keys to your emotional well-being. As soon as you try at all costs to make life go according to plan, you doom yourself to heartache and disappointment. And finally, when you demand justice from a world that was never created to satisfy your egotistical needs, you lock yourself in a prison of unfulfilled hopes and bitter disappointment. However, when the moment comes to break free from the shackles of excessive control and wise acceptance replaces apathy, amazing changes begin to occur in life. A certain inner strength awakens within you, giving you a sense of confidence and tranquility. The desire for the approval of others gradually fades, and the fear of possible failures loses its sharpness. Dependence on predictability and the pursuit of certainty give way to something deeper and more meaningful, the ability to react to what is happening consciously rather than under the influence of fear, and therein lies true freedom. It's worth thinking about those people who seem invulnerable in the face of life's trials. They walk through fire without burning, remain calm in moments of mass panic, and maintain composure under the onslaught of chaos, criticism, or uncertainty. Their strength lies not in controlling the external world, but in managing their internal state. They have stopped trying to subordinate the surrounding reality to their will, instead learning to control their minds, their reactions, and their energy. These people do not need ideal conditions to feel happy and peaceful. They do not seek the approval of others to feel their worth, and they are not afraid of uncertainty because they are rooted in something much more solid than external circumstances, in self-awareness. They have grasped a truth that remains inaccessible to most people. Control over the external world is just an illusion. Life cannot be organized like a checklist, people cannot be predicted like formulas, and the world will never conform to anyone's personal preferences. When a person abandons attempts to forcibly fit reality to their own ideas of what should be, they discover a source of genuine strength. A paradox arises: as soon as the obsessive desire for control disappears, the desired begins to materialize. Without regard to the opinions of others, confidence comes naturally. Success, which they stopped desperately chasing, finds them. When the struggle with life ceases, along with resistance and fear of its every turn, a harmonious movement with it begins. The person flows, adapts, and life becomes easier. Where dead ends were previously seen, new opportunities open up, and anxiety is replaced by peace. This is not just a beautiful spiritual idea, but a scientifically proven fact. Cognitive psychology and neuroscience confirm that the stronger the desire to control a situation, a relationship, a goal, or even one's own thoughts, the more internal resistance arises. The brain goes into a state of stress, the focus of attention narrows, thinking becomes rigid, and the person inadvertently sabotages their own desires. That is why people desperately seeking love often push it away, and those afraid of failure subconsciously create conditions for its occurrence. Control freaks tend to feel the most out of control. The need for control stems from fear, but when fear gives way to awareness, presence, and trust, a transformation occurs. The world around does not change, but the person themselves changes. The central question of existence lies in the choice between reactive existence and conscious action. Does a person drift along the current of life, led by automatism, where every remark, failure, or disappointment dictates their emotional state? Or do they take on the role of an observer, selectively filtering through themselves only what resonates with their inner world? As soon as awareness arrives, penetrating not only the mind but also the very essence, that external factors have no power, unless the person themselves gives it to them, life transforms into a completely different game. Instead of a position of victim of circumstances, the individual becomes a strategist, an architect of their inner experience. This is the essence of the untouchable mind, a state of steadfastness in the face of chaos, equanimity in the face of noise, and insensitivity to petty dramas that previously consumed them. Imagine a situation: a person walks down the street in a state of peace and suddenly hears an insult addressed to them, malicious words aimed at causing pain. Perhaps they are called worthless, stupid, or weak. At that moment, time seems to stand still. Most people would react instantly: rage, resentment, an adrenaline rush, endlessly scrolling the insult in their thoughts. They lose control, not because of the words themselves, but because these words touched unhealed wounds inside. Imagine a completely different picture of the world. You hear offensive words, but they evoke absolutely no emotions in you, no violent reaction, no desire to defend yourself. Only a calm, detached thought, unrelated to your personality. And it's not about insensitivity or indifference, but about a clear understanding of yourself and the world around you. This is the result of painstaking work on yourself, a deep knowledge of your own essence which no one can shake. This is what the Stoics practiced. This is what the Zen masters strived for. Carl Jung also spoke about this, arguing that the unconscious controls a person's life until it becomes conscious, and then it is called fate. They all understood one simple truth: external factors are not able to disrupt the inner world unless you give them that opportunity. By blocking this access, a person not only protects their peace, but also transforms their entire life. But let's delve into this question, leaving behind superficial reactions and fleeting emotions. Why are most people so susceptible to the words and actions of others? The answer lies in the fragility of their identity, in the unconsciously created false self, a mental mask woven from others' opinions, a desire for public approval, achievements, and a desperate need for control. This identity is extremely vulnerable because it is based on external factors. Therefore, criticism, challenge, or rejection does not simply affect a person, but destroys them. The insult penetrates not under the skin, but into the very core of their self-perception. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, in his works, touched upon the theme of the shadow self, a hidden area of the human psyche where unsightly aspects of personality find refuge. Complexes, shame, unprocessed psychological traumas, and fear of inadequacy languish there. When an external factor becomes a trigger, it does not generate pain, but only awakens old wounds that the person has tried to ignore. At this moment, the illusion of well-being collapses. If an individual were in harmony with themselves, accepting their shortcomings and past, insults from the outside would be perceived as insignificant noise. Like a cry in the mountains, they would bounce off without causing harm. The reaction to external stimuli is an indicator of internal state. If words about failure cause pain, perhaps deep down the person believes in it. Disrespect from others can cause rage, indicating an unmet need for recognition. The discrepancy between life circumstances and expectations can lead to disappointment not because of the failure itself, but because of an excessive attachment to a specific result that determines self-esteem. The true root of mental anguish lies not in external circumstances, not in the people around or the problems that have piled up, but in the deep relationship of a person with themselves, in their self-identification, inflated expectations, and personal narrative. Genuine liberation from suffering does not lie in attempts to silence the world around or escape from unpleasant criticism. It is impossible to forever protect oneself from irritating factors, let alone control other people's opinions. True and lasting strength grows from within. It is forged in the process of painstaking inner work, in a courageous confrontation with one's own shadow, and not in its projection onto others. This strength is born in the desire to become a person who no longer needs external approval to feel their own integrity, who will not break under the burden of pressure, because their foundation is built not on shifting sand, but on the solid foundation of truth, awareness, and reason. This foundation is so stable and inviolable that even the most deafening chaos is perceived as silence. Ultimately, control over the situation begins not with the external world, but with personal perception. And this is not just an abstract philosophical concept, but a psychological conditioning deeply rooted in the very structure of the human brain. Years of research in the field of neuroscience and behavioral psychology convincingly prove that emotional reactivity is not just an individual character trait, but an ingrained habit. Every time a person allows external factors to dictate their internal state, whether it is anger, shame, fear, or insecurity, they strengthen the neural connections that will make such a reaction even more automatic in the future. The brain, by virtue of its amazing efficiency, learns through repetition, and if reacting to criticism, failures, or discomfort becomes a constant practice, then such behavior becomes a default setting. However, the real power lies in the dynamism of this wiring. Modern neurobiologists convincingly prove that the brain has amazing plasticity and the ability to change. Through constant practice of mindfulness, the ability to rethink situations, and the gradual acceptance of discomfort instead of running away from it, a person is able to reconfigure their internal system. Over time, grievances lose their former sharpness, failures cease to be perceived as an inevitable collapse, and uncertainty turns into a field for research and discovery rather than a source of panic. Ultimately, something truly remarkable happens. A person becomes invulnerable not because the world around becomes more benevolent, but because their nervous system ceases to see a threat in it. And here's where it gets interesting. There is an amazing and often overlooked truth about human nature. People tend to believe that they are reacting to the world around them, but in reality they are reacting to themselves, to their unresolved emotions, to the stories they subconsciously carry within them for years, to the internal dialogue that remains unheard by others. Imagine a situation. An insult is thrown at a person, words wound like a dagger. They flinch, feel pain. But it is worth stopping and asking yourself, where does this pain come from? Is it contained in the words themselves or in the meaning that the person attaches to them? In what old story do they awaken echoes? What unhealed wound do they inadvertently touch? After all, if a person were truly healed, if they had stopped fearing being weak, unworthy, or unnoticed, these words would bounce off them like pebbles off a smooth surface. Carl Jung demonstrated a deep understanding of this issue, and his words sound like a challenge. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This is a harsh but liberating truth that many prefer to ignore throughout their lives. No one and nothing from the outside has power over a person until they give that power away. Gaining control over one's interpretations of events is tantamount to gaining control over one's mind. And when the mind is under control, the world ceases to be a dictator, becoming merely a reflection of one's internal state. Imagine a mirror. If the reflection in it suddenly distorted into a grimace, would you get angry at the glass? Would you shout at it or try to fix it? Most likely, you would realize that the mirror is merely reflecting what is. However, when life does the same, when people provoke, when situations evoke undesirable emotions, the reaction is often directed at the world around. Accusations, demands for changes from others, attempts to adjust the mirror. All this instead of looking inside oneself and seeing what is actually being reflected. In its essence, the world merely demonstrates what already exists within a person. As a result, a logical question arises: why do we give so much power to factors beyond our control? Why are fleeting remarks a delay in response, or a disapproving look capable of disrupting our inner balance? The answer lies in a concept that is both simple and profound: attachment. When our sense of self is inextricably linked to external attributes such as public opinion, social status, the need for approval, or achieved results, a person becomes a hostage of circumstances. They are constantly exposed to phenomena over which they have no control. However, there is a fundamentally different approach. What if you completely abandon this game? What if, instead of an automatic reaction, you begin to observe what is happening? This does not mean becoming an insensitive and indifferent person. Detachment is not the absence of emotions, but rather the presence of awareness. It is understanding that you are not the embodiment of anger, sadness, or fear, but rather the one who observes them. Imagine a raging thunderstorm. Lightning pierces the sky, thunder rumbles, the wind howls. But the sky itself remains untouched, boundless, and imperturbable. A person is the sky and emotions are the storm, and as soon as they stop identifying with the storm, it loses its power over them. This is where the change lies, this is where the power lies. True strength lies not in controlling other people or manipulating circumstances, but in managing one's own perception. The most amazing thing happens when a person stops automatically reacting to external stimuli, becoming unpredictable and imperturbable. Those around feel this change, losing the ability to manipulate them through insults, guilt, or flattery. They are bewildered by someone who does not succumb to provocations and does not support destructive games, because this person has regained their energy, restoring the inner peace, clarity of mind, and strength of spirit that always belonged to them. It is from this moment that not just survival in the world begins, but its shaping. A logical question arises: how to achieve a state of imperturbable presence, inner silence, when the world no longer has power over emotions? Chaos does not affect the very essence, and a person moves through life like a mountain, rooted, aware, and free. The path to this state begins not with effort or tension, but with a fundamental change in awareness, with the understanding that reactions to the world are merely interpretations created by the mind. The world itself is neutral, and it is the mind that colors it with fear, resentment, or excessive importance. As an example, consider a situation where two people encounter the same event. For example, when a stranger accidentally bumps into them on the street. One person shrugs, smiles, and forgets about it in a few seconds, while the other takes what happened personally, allowing this minor incident to ruin their mood for the whole day. An endless carousel of obsessive thoughts, revolving around themes of neglect and egocentrism, can torment the mind for hours. The same incident, as if reflected in a crooked mirror, creates completely different pictures of reality. What is the key to this phenomenon? The answer is simple. The event itself is not the source of emotions, but how we interpret it. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung frequently emphasized the existence of a shadow self within each of us, an area where suppressed, rejected, or carefully hidden aspects of our being reside. This includes complexes, fears, childhood psychological traumas, and deeply buried shame, everything we've come to deem unacceptable or a sign of weakness. The paradox is that the more we try to suppress these shadow manifestations, the more power they gain over us. This is why certain words or actions strike a nerve, triggering a storm of negative emotions. Why do some people irritate us, seemingly without any apparent reason? It's because they aren't the creators of our pain, but merely expose wounds that haven't yet healed. And those who skillfully manipulate our feelings only have power over us because they touch upon parts of our personality that we haven't yet acknowledged or accepted. Therefore, the path to inner resilience lies not in suppressing emotions or creating an illusion of indifference. Such strategies are merely another mask, concealing the true self. Genuine transformation begins with deep self-analysis, with an honest and unbiased look within. Instead of impulsively reacting to triggers, we should carefully examine their nature, asking ourselves questions that penetrate the superficial layers. What exactly triggered this reaction in me? What story am I telling myself right now? What part of me feels vulnerable? Once the light of awareness penetrates the shadow, it loses its power. Once we allow ourselves to fully experience an emotion, without judging it or trying to push it away, it ceases to control us. This is the key. It's not about becoming insensitive, but about gaining awareness, recognizing and accepting every part of ourselves so fully that no external factors can shake our inner integrity. Imagine human existence as a vast chess game where the vast majority of people are doomed to lead a miserable existence as mere pieces. Pawns, like puppets, obey the blind will of circumstance. Knights, like twitching marionettes, convulsively react to unpredictable twists of fate. Queens, exhausted by the immense burden of responsibility, vainly try to tame chaos. Every step becomes a desperate attempt to survive, every moment a relentless struggle for existence. However, true mastery is revealed only when an individual breaks free from the shackles of figurativeness and ascends to the role of a full-fledged player. One who can step back from the hustle and bustle, survey the entire chessboard, and anticipate the development of events, guided not by fear, but by conscious understanding. And if you strive to grasp profound truths, become one who observes the events from a bird's-eye view, calm, insightful, and unperturbed, capable of discerning every pattern and predicting consequences long before they occur. This is the essence of emotional detachment, not in insensitive coldness and suppression of emotions, but in wise awareness. Deep inner knowledge suggests that emotions are not enemies to be eradicated, but valuable signals that deserve close attention. And when a person learns to observe instead of blindly reacting, they rise above the chaos, gaining the ability to be an observer, not a prisoner of their own inner world. An amazing transformation occurs. As soon as an individual stops automatically responding to external stimuli, the world around them begins to react in response. A person's energy field undergoes changes. Their presence becomes more palpable and profound. Those around them sense this change and experience an inexplicable attraction. There is no longer a need to chase approval, as attention and recognition come on their own. Negative influences lose their power because they find no response. A person ceases to be a puppet in the hands of circumstances and gradually gains the ability to influence what is happening. However, it's not about achieving perfection, but about developing awareness in real time. At every moment of life, in every conversation, in every challenging situation, two possibilities open up before a person: to react mindlessly or to observe consciously. The next time someone tries to unbalance you, it's important to catch that moment, even for an instant. You need to feel the wave of irritation rising, and instead of succumbing to it, stop and observe what is happening. Study it like a scientist observing a chemical reaction. This moment of awareness opens the door to inner strength and control.